As I look out over the congregation this evening, in a good congregation, I think about what Pope Francis has said in his letter about holiness. As I mentioned as we began the Mass, we are to recognize the holiness in the people whose images are here in church, on the walls, on the windows, but also in our neighbor. And of course, I don't know you that well because I'm only here a few months. But it is wonderful to be here among you, knowing that, yes, here is holiness. That's why you are here tonight in this Mass, celebrating the holiness that God gives to all of humanity. Of course, we have to be willing to accept His gift. And so let us think a moment about that holiness that Jesus tells us about in the Gospel of this evening. Being poor in spirit means, we do not place all the importance of our life in our material things, recognizing that the material is passing. But we, who are baptized, have a future beyond this world, beyond the material, a great mystery. But yes, that is part of being holy, recognizing the life beyond what we can see and touch today. And Jesus says also, those who are clean of heart. And as we think about that, we know that God has given to us impulses. We can become angry. It's an impulse. But if we use it correctly to stand up against sin and also evil in the world, that is a good use of this gift of God. And using anger in a good way, constructive way, is part of being holy. And then we know about our sexuality, which is also a gift from God. But those who are good parents, like the parents of the little one back there who is talking now, sharing with us her little voice, that is also holiness, using God's gift in a constructive, wonderful way. And so there are many, many different ways in which we live holiness according to what Jesus tells us in the gospel. People who are working for justice. All of the creation was meant for all of humanity. And so those who work so that all of humanity has a share in creation and is able to meet his or her material needs of food and clothing and shelter, yes, this is a person who is saintly. And also it tells us about those who are peacemakers, who try to bring peace. These also are holy actions. And so, my brothers and sisters, as we think about holiness, let us always have in mind what Jesus tells us about holiness, so that we would not just think about someone who has hands folded looking up to heaven and think that contemplating God, that's all. We realize that no, living our humanity in a Christian way sometimes is quite radical, but that is holiness here on earth, here and now. And then as we think of the first reading of today, which is from the book of Apocalypse, it talks about 144,000 who were signed. But then it also talks about even beyond that. John had this vision of all of humanity being included in those who are marked with the sign of salvation. And so it's important for us also to think about not just who we know right here in Dayton, Ohio, or in the state of Ohio, or in the United States of America, but as we think about the book of Apocalypse, which tells us in a very, very sometimes mysterious but also real way, the holiness is to be found in all of humanity, whether the person lives here or in Russia or in China or in some other place of the world. And as I was thinking of that today, it come to my mind a person in Lima, not Lima, but Santiago, Chile, far away from here. His name was Lucho Venegas. He was a permanent deacon, like Rusty. He had his wife, who was Alicia, and he had 3 children. His daughter participated very much in the parish youth group, and then he had 2 sons who were just a little older than she. And the holiness of Lucho was that when he and Alicia were married for a number of years, he would spend much of his time on the weekend playing a guitar and singing in a group in different places, nightclubs, entertaining, very professional. But then Alicia said to him, Lucho, we never see you. And sometimes when you do see you, you are intoxicated. Or you're so tired you can't even have time for your children. And Lucho listened to God and to his wife and decided, no, I will give up that weekend work in nightclubs and be with my wife and with my children. And then, little by little, he felt called to become a permanent deacon. And during my time in Santiago de Chile, he was ordained a permanent deacon. And Alicia, his wife, approved of all that. And then Deacon Lucho, began to work in the parish. He was a shoemaker, which was his trade. He worked at that every day. Then on Saturdays, on Sundays, he was at the parish. And he was with his wife also doing work for the parish and preparing people for Holy Communion, he was visiting the sick, and he was going out to people in a way that none of us priests could do, because he spoke the language of the people. The people felt close to God through him. And at his funeral, I was no longer in Chile at the time, when Lucho passed from this world to eternal life. It was a church almost as big as this one here, and there was no room in church for all the people who came to his funeral, because he took so many people into a life of holiness in very practical ways in which the people understood holiness And so today, I recognize Lucho. He's not in one of these windows here, but he's in heaven. And he is an example of someone who did live the 8 Beatitudes we have listened to in the gospel, and he also took many people closer and closer to God. And so at the second reading from St. John, we hear the persons who live like this are children of God. Children of God. Not just children of our parents, but children of God with an eternal inheritance, life everlasting. And also, as St. John says, it has not been revealed yet exactly how that will be. But we do know that when it is revealed, we shall be like him. For we shall see him as he is. You and I, if we live the holiness that we should be living as husbands or wives or as good children or as engineers, taxi drivers, bookkeepers, or teachers, if we live this life in a correct way, then we will see God as he is someday. And so everyone who has this hope based on him makes himself pure, as Jesus and God is pure. God is love. And he who abides in love abides in God, and God in him.